The people of Venezuela are facing a disaster of almost unimaginable proportions. Two powerful earthquakes just a minute apart have caused widespread destruction around the capital, Caracas. The 7.2 and 7.5 earthquakes struck Wednesday evening. Hundreds of buildings collapsed. More than 180 people have died. But with thousands reported missing, the death toll is expected to rise dramatically. Multiple countries and aid organizations are sending help. Here's Prime Minister Mark Carney speaking earlier.
We are moving to provide humanitarian aid. We're working with our partners directly. And we will scale things as appropriate to move forward.
Okay, here to tell us more about Canada's response is Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand. Minister, we appreciate you coming in on a busy day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David.
So it's $5 million in initial aid to the people of Venezuela. Clearly, based on what we know at this point, it's going to take a lot more than that. What more can we expect from Canada on this?
Well, Secretary Soraya and I announced $5 million to address the absolutely devastating impact of those two earthquakes. We are seeing schools, hospitals, infrastructure being completely leveled, leaving people without food, shelter, and the basic necessities of life. And so we wanted to just, 12 hours after coming into the knowledge of this devastating set of earthquakes, provide initial humanitarian aid that will be delivered by trusted organizations on the ground. We are also working with the Humanitarian Coalition. If there is a matching program set up, we will look at the possibility of additional tranches of aid, but we certainly wanted to get this aid out the door as soon as possible.
Okay, the matching was going to be my next question, because this is a common practice as Canada offers support. If Canadians want to donate to the Red Cross or a particular organization, you would match it up to a certain amount. So I know that's not part of today, but that is something you would consider?
Something on our radar, and we are working with other partners to determine how best to address further tranches of aid. Recognizing this is truly devastating. I've just returned from Panama, where the Organization of American States were meeting, and I put on the table the need to work proactively on issues of urgency. And strangely enough, here is one where we can work together throughout the hemisphere to address an absolutely devastating humanitarian situation. And so I've certainly been in touch with my partners about how we can do more together.
So you say you're working through trusted agents, trusted groups. I mean, we're talking like the Red Cross, these sorts of things. Yeah. I presume, and this is based on a point the Prime Minister made today in his press conference, the government of Venezuela is not a trusted agent. There hasn't been formal diplomatic relations since about 2019, if I remember correctly. How does that complicate this process in terms of not having people on the ground, not having consular services? Because the Prime Minister said today this is something he has learned. It's a challenge.
It is a challenge, and so we are working with our mission in Colombia, for example, to ensure that humanitarian aid will be distributed and Canadians who require our assistance can be helped. We have about 800 Canadians who are registered in Venezuela, and as you say, the impact is devastating and the death toll could and likely will increase. The second possibility is for us to work with other countries. I was in touch with, for example, with Secretary Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, this morning, to put on the table potential collaboration between Canada and the UK in the delivery of aid, in the possibility of coordinating on logistics. And so that is what we are discussing. And the third point is additional humanitarian aid to be garnered and gathered here in Canada, as well as to be delivered through international organizations. So we're really pushing on all fronts, Secretary Soraya and I, and will continue to do so, given the need to respond to this absolutely horrific humanitarian situation.
The quote today, though, from the Prime Minister on the lack of an embassy and consular presence there is that it puts us at a disadvantage, first and foremost, to helping Canadians that are in these countries. And he expanded it from Venezuela, which is obviously in a very acute situation, but he also talked about Iran. And I know you have seen the concerns raised by the Iranian diaspora that there's been some suggestion that the government may look at restoring diplomatic relations with the regime. And I know the Prime Minister talked around that today, said he's making a general point about the disadvantage. And even if you did re-engage, it's not necessarily endorsement. But should we take this to mean that you're looking at countries like Venezuela and looking at countries like Iran and maybe going back to a consular, if not full, embassy presence there?
We don't have plans to do so right now, David, but we do always want to serve the interests of Canadians abroad, and we want to make sure that we're able to distribute humanitarian aid. And so in the moment that we are faced with right now, the question is, how do we get that aid out the door? How do we ensure that we are helping Canadians who rely on the Government of Canada through our consular services to be there for them? And how do we make sure that we're able to deliver humanitarian aid most efficiently? That's the set of problems that we are addressing, and the Prime Minister is absolutely right. Engagement doesn't mean endorsement. We need to find efficient ways to help on an international scale, and that's exactly what we're doing through our mission in Colombia, through working with other countries, the UK as one example, as well as through trusted international multilateral organizations.
Right. So I take your point that there's currently no plan. But the Prime Minister raising it today, does that mean it's at least on the table for consideration? Like, how should we interpret it? Is there an internal process going on where you're like, how do we do this? Do we need to go back? Because you've seen the pushback, obviously, with people who've been victimized by some of the more difficult regimes. But yet at the same time, we still have an embassy open in Russia, if I'm correct. So are you engaged in a process of considering this or looking at options?
So the way we're addressing these issues right now is to engage with countries, some of whom are close allies and partners, some of whom we don't traditionally engage with. And for example, in ensuring that Canadians could leave Iran last June, we were speaking with Turkmenistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, to ensure that Canadians could leave Iran and could do so safely. We had consular officials at the border right along those countries where they interfaced with Iran. The question really is that the most efficient way for us to be serving and helping Canadians abroad? So that's the question that we're looking at. And as I said, we've taken no decisions, but we are looking at how best to serve Canadians, not only within this country, but internationally. And that will be a process that occurs over the next number of months.
So could it be a situation where a consulate opens in one of these countries, but it falls short of a full embassy? I don't know enough about the niceties of the diplomatic rules, but consular services, non-nuclear proliferation, these are the things you're talking to Iran about. Is that the sort of thing you would consider? Because it sounds like you're looking at something different than what we have now, but maybe not all the way to a full normalization.
I think I heard you say we're talking to Iran. We actually are not talking to Iran. We don't have diplomatic relations with Iran or Venezuela. In fact, we have complex sanctions regimes against both Venezuela and Iran. And so it's not simply a matter of opening an embassy or not.
I understand.
It's a very complex diplomatic relationship when we're dealing with those two countries. And so, again, we're faced with humanitarian devastation right now in Venezuela. Our priority is to get humanitarian aid out the door. That's why we're making the announcement of $5 million today. And we will continue to find the most efficient and effective way to distribute humanitarian aid and to serve Canadians within and outside Canada.
Right. And just to clarify my point, I was just referring to a statement from your department saying, not currently considering reopening an embassy, talks with Iran are limited to consular matters, human rights, and nuclear
on Iran, if I could just elaborate, when we needed to help Canadians, one of the ways we do that is through a third country.
Right.
And so Italy was the interlocutor between Canada and the government in place, or the regime in place in Iran. So that can be somewhat inefficient. When you have Canadians who want to leave the jurisdiction as soon as possible, involving a third country, and we thank Italy for being that interlocutor, can be cumbersome. And so how best do we ensure we're serving Canadians? How best do we ensure that we're delivering humanitarian aid? Those are questions that we need to take a look at as the number of humanitarian crises seems to be increasing, as does the number of conflicts around the world.
Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand, an unscheduled visit on the show. We appreciate you coming in today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.